the man known to history as Qin Shi Huang, literally meaning the first august emperor of Qin, was born in 259 BC in the kingdom of Zhao, one of the 7 major warring states in China. His birth name is commonly given as Yingzheng. At this time, China was divided into 7 states, of which the kingdom of Qin was the most westerly, with its capital in Xianyang. Yingzheng was born into the Qin royal family. Qin Shi Huang's parentage is one of the many details of his life subject to dispute. He is said to have been the eldest son of Yi Ren, a prince of the kingdom of Qin. Yi Ren was a grandson of King Zhaoxiang, the ruler of the kingdom of Qin at the time of Yingzheng's birth, and had spent some time serving as a hostage at the neighboring kingdom of Zhao, as part of the terms of a peace treaty between the 2 states of Qin and Zhao. Qin Shi Huang's mother was Zhao Ji, a woman who had once been a concubine of Lu Bu Wei, a wealthy merchant then operating from the Zhao capital Handan, who befriended Prince Yi Ren during his time there. A passage in the records of the Grand Historian, an early history of Chinese dynastic history written by Sima Qian, the father of Chinese historiography, claims that Lady Zhao was already pregnant with Lu Bu Wei's child by the time she married the prince, and thus that Yingzheng's real father was in fact Lu Bu Wei. Although the tale of Qin Shi Huang's illegitimacy has been accepted in China for over 2,000 years, historians still debate it. Lu Bu Wei had won Prince Yi Ren's friendship by giving him a gift of 1,000 gold pieces. This payment was an investment in Yi Ren's political prospects. At the time, these did not look particularly promising, as his father, Lord Anguo, heir to the Qin throne, had over 20 children, and Yi Ren was one of his junior sons. Not only did Yi Ren have several elder brothers who might have a greater claim to their father's inheritance, his status as a hostage in Zhao indicated that the Qin court considered him dispensable. Nevertheless, Lu reminded his friend that since Lord Anguo had no children with his primary consort, Lady Huang, his remaining children had an equal claim to his inheritance. It was still up to Lady Huang to nominate an heir in the absence of her own offspring, and Lu Bu Wei hatched a plan for Yi Ren to use his newly acquired riches to influence Lady Huang and secure the succession for himself. With the gold he had acquired, Prince Yi Ren began to acquire supporters in Zhao, while Lu traveled to Qin and ingratiated himself with Lady Huang, with gifts and tales of Prince Yi Ren's regard for her. This campaign succeeded, and Lady Huang adopted Prince Yi Ren as her own son. Not long after, Yi Ren married Zhao Ji, and Prince Zheng, who would one day become known as Qin Shi Huang, was born. These were the circumstances of Qin Shi Huang's birth, ones which created doubts about who his father was, but also led to Prince Yi Ren's prospects of succeeding to become King of Qin one day, becoming substantially better. Despite being one of history's great conquerors and perhaps the most influential person in early Chinese history, Prince Zheng's biographical details are only vaguely understood and subject to scholarly debate. The primary textual source for the Qin emperor's life is the records of the Grand Historian, or Shiji as it is also known, written in the late 2nd century BC during the era of the Western Han Dynasty by Sima Qian. Beyond this written evidence, excavations at the site of Qin Shi Huang's Grand Mausoleum complex near the city of Xi'an have uncovered and continue to reveal evidence to offer further insight into the life and reign of the first Qin emperor. Other ancient Chinese chronicles and histories add further to our knowledge, but these are also suffused with fantastical anecdotes about the emperor's life and need to be approached cautiously. and a half later. Although Xiangyang was killed in 338 BC, his reforms survived him and served as a basis for Qin military conquests over the next century. By 325 BC, Lord Xiao's son and successor, Lord Huang, was confident enough to call himself king, a title that had also been adopted by most of the other warring states. In 316 BC, King Huang conquered the states of Shu and Ba in Sichuan to extend his realm far to the south. His successors, notably King Zhaoxiang, Zhong's great-grandfather, continued to expand the growing kingdom of Qin in the late 4th and early 3rd centuries BC, primarily at the expense of the kingdoms of Han and Wei. A notable victory came at the Battle of Yichue in 293 BC, but reports that the kingdom of Qin's armies inflicted 240,000 enemy casualties probably need to be treated cautiously as exaggerations. By the 260s BC, the kingdoms of Wei and Han had been reduced to a more minor status, and now Qin was engaged in a major clash for hegemony amongst the 7 warring states, with the kingdom of Zhao historically the most powerful of the Chinese states. In 260 BC, just a year or so before Zhong was born, Qin's armies won a major victory over the Zhao at the Battle of Changping. Through these efforts, by the time Zhong came to the throne in the mid-240s BC, the kingdom of Qin had emerged as the most powerful of the 7 warring states, a development which was exemplified by the other states allying with each other to resist the establishment of Qin hegemony over them. During the early years of his reign, King Zhong was little more than a figurehead, while real power was exercised by the Chancellor and the Queen Dowager. Lu Bu-wei desired to make the kingdom of Qin an intellectual center and invited scholars from all over China to come to Xianyang and serve as advisors. One of these men was Li Se, a native of the kingdom of Chu and a Confucian scholar. He was a legalist in the tradition of Xiangyang and a growing believer in the great Qin enterprise to unify China. Not long after his arrival in Xianyang, Li Se was granted an audience with King Zhong and soon became a key advisor and unofficial tutor to the king. He informed the young king that while Qin was the most powerful of the warring states, it could still be defeated by a coalition of the other 6 powers. Thus, Li advised, in order to unify China, Qin had to sow discord among its rivals and prevent them from coming together. The king responded by sending agents to the other warring states to persuade their officials to pursue a pro-Qin policy. Some were bribed, and others who refused to acquiesce to his demands were assassinated. Zhong's conversations with Li Se may have encouraged the young king's hopes of uniting China completely under his rule one day, even as Qin armies continued to conquer new territories which were incorporated as commanderies. However, Qin was facing political instability at home. In 239 BC, King Zhong's younger half-brother, Prince Chongjiao, defected to Zhao while leading an invasion force. The prince was soon killed in battle and his officers executed. The king was now in his 20s and could expect to assume the reins of power after his manhood ceremony. But Lu Bu-wei had been the power behind the throne for more than a decade and was reluctant to relinquish control so easily. Although the chancellor's political position seemed unassailable, he feared losing office if his relationship with the Dowager Queen were to become public knowledge. Accordingly, he found a stooge named Lao Ai and inserted him to the Dowager's household, taking care to disguise the man as a eunuch by plucking out his beard and eyebrows while leaving the rest of his anatomy intact. The Dowager was impressed by Lao Ai's attributes and fell in love with him. She soon became pregnant and had to move out of the capital to hide the consequences of her liaison with the supposed eunuch. By 239 BC, the dowager was bold enough to bestow upon her lover the noble title of Marquis of Changxin, despite the fact that eunuchs were barred from holding aristocratic titles. The following year, the 21-year-old King Zheng underwent the manhood ceremony that enabled him to assume his full royal powers. He would have taken a foreign princess as his wife at this time, although the names of his wives and consorts are mostly unknown. According to the records of the Grand Historian, the king visited the ancient Qin capital of Huang, where he performed sacrifices at the tombs of his ancestors. The king understood that even after the ceremony, the regents might still be reluctant to yield their power. Prince Chengjiao's recent rebellion hinted that there was a faction at the Qin court prepared to overthrow the king, while Lu Bu-wei and Lao Ai were involved in their own power struggle. According to Sima Qian, the author of the records of the Grand Historian, not long before his coming-of-age ceremony, the king received word that Lao Ai was not a real eunuch at all, but was engaged in a fully fledged affair with the Queen Dowager. Furthermore, the Dowager had 2 sons by Lao Ai, and it was rumored that the couple were conspiring to install one of them upon the throne upon the death of King Zheng. The king responded by launching an investigation into the matter, which uncovered the whole saga. When Lao Ai learned that he was under investigation, he organized a revolt among a faction of followers that he had built up and issued orders using the Dowager's royal seal. King Zheng responded by sending loyal officers to crush the rebellion, and Lao Ai was driven away from the capital. He was eventually captured by Qin troops and executed along with his relatives, including the 2 young sons born to the Queen Dowager, who were perceived as potential rival claimants to the Qin throne at some time in the future. The king sent his mother away from the capital and sought to protect her from the accusations that she was involved in Lao Ai's rebellion. After learning of Lu Bu-wei's role in setting up Lao Ai's affair with his mother, the king wished to execute him, but the chancellor's valuable contributions to the Qin state ensured that his life was spared at this time. He remained problematic though. In 237 BC, he was dismissed from office and ordered away from the capital. 2 years later, after hearing word that Lu Bu-wei had been receiving many visitors among the feudal lords, the king feared that the former chancellor was plotting against him. When Lu received a message from the king sending him to a more distant exile in Shu, he decided to kill himself by drinking poison to avoid further stains upon his honor and a further fall from grace. The downfall of Lu Bu-wei coincided with the rise of Li Se, the legalist philosopher who had now been part of the king's inner circle for a decade. However, Li Se's position at court was also threatened in 237 BC when the king issued a decree to expel foreigners from the Qin state. King Zheng adopted this policy to get rid of Lu Bu-wei, but if implemented in full, it would have been a calamity for the Qin, which had counted on the services of many foreign statesmen and generals to establish itself as the most powerful of the warring states. Facing the threat of expulsion himself, Li Se presented a memorial to the king, arguing forcefully against the policy. In addition to reminding the king about the contributions of foreigners to the state, Li Se pointed out that the women and horses that the king enjoyed were not native to Qin either. The king was persuaded by Li Se and reversed the order, and all foreigners were permitted to remain at the Qin court, while Li Se was later appointed to a position equivalent to the Minister of Justice in charge of the laws of the Kingdom of Qin and their implementation. Although the Lao Ai affair had been extremely embarrassing for the Qin and delayed further conquests for a year, King Zheng had eliminated his political rivals and sat more securely on his throne. The military campaigns resumed in 236 BC when the Qin generals Wang Jian and Huang led armies against the Kingdom of Wei and captured the cities of Ye and Anyang. 2 years later, Huang attacked Zhao and allegedly killed 100,000 enemy troops in the Battle of Pingyang. The continued success of Qin armies was especially troubling to the small state of Han, which had managed to survive so long by being a buffer state for powerful neighbors. However, Li Se set his sights on the conquest and subjugation of Han as the first step in eliminating the warring states one by one. The king of Han was debating with his ministers whether it was better to join an alliance led by Qin or one opposing Qin. Han Fei, a member of the Han royal family and a talented legalist scholar who had studied alongside Li Se at Shunzi's academy, petitioned his king not to join either alliance, but instead to adopt legalist reforms to strengthen the state so it could remain neutral. While Han Fei failed to influence policy in his native country, King Zheng was greatly impressed by his arguments when he read his writings and told a jealous Li Se that he hoped to meet him one day. This became reality in 233 BC, when the king of Han sent Han Fei to Xianyang, the Qin capital, where Zheng's court was, in a desperate attempt to stop an invasion by Qin armies through diplomatic negotiations. Upon arrival at the Qin court, Han Fei presented the king with a list of arguments against the invasion of his homeland. The philosopher reminded King Zheng that Han had served as a valuable buffer state and had never caused any trouble for the Qin. While Han Fei had no illusions that a Qin invasion of Han would eventually succeed, he warned that its armies would only do so after an extremely long and bloody campaign against Han troops who would defend their cities and fortresses to the last. While King Zheng was somewhat convinced by Han Fei's arguments, Li Se was less than impressed by his interloper and reminded his overlord that Han Fei was on a mission on behalf of his king and could not possibly have Qin's interests at heart. Li Se proposed that Han Fei should be kept as a hostage while he went on his own mission to the Han court. However, when he left, Li Se was not granted an audience with the king of Han and returned to Xianyang empty-handed. In Li Se's absence, Han Fei continued to ingratiate himself with King Zheng. Thus, when Li Se returned to the Qin capital, he told the king that there was no question of employing Han Fei at the Qin court, but that letting him return home with all the intelligence he had acquired about Qin's plans would be too dangerous. The only option was to consider Han Fei a foreign agent and put him to death. King Zheng reluctantly agreed, and Li Se mobilized his agents to force Han Fei to drink poison before the king had a chance to reconsider the fatal decision. With the death of Han Fei in 233 BC, the king of Han realized that diplomatic negotiations had failed, and instead decided to submit to the Qin before his territory was invaded. Over the next few years, Qin troops and officials were sent to take control of Han territory and establish Qin political institutions. With Han out of the way, the Qin resumed their attacks on Zhao, and by 228 BC, General Wang Jian had conquered the kingdom after successfully besieging the city of Handan and making the king of Zhao his prisoner. The same year, the Dowager Queen Zhao died and was buried in the mausoleum of King Zhuanxiang. Following the conquest of Zhao, the enlarged Qin state now bordered the eastern kingdoms of Yan and Qi. Crown Prince Dan of Yan, seeing Qin armies conquering their way through Zhao, feared that his country would be next. Earlier in his life, this prince had served as a hostage in both Zhao and Qin, and had been one of King Jung's closest childhood companions. When both men reached adulthood, Crown Prince Dan realized that his friend had ambitions to conquer all of China and fled back home to Yan. After considering his options and recognizing that the Yan army could not hope to defeat the Qin on the battlefield, Prince Dan decided to hire a talented swordsman named Jing Ke to assassinate the King of Qin. The plot was planned meticulously, and in order to secure an interview with King Jung, Jing Ke went to the Qing court carrying the head of a renegade Qin general who had sought refuge in the kingdom of Yan, but agreed to sacrifice himself in the name of a greater cause. Legend has it that after a considerable delay, during which Qin armies completed the conquest of Zhao, Jing Ke eventually set out for Shenyang carrying the head of the unfortunate general and a map of a Yan border region through which Qin armies could invade. He was granted an audience with the king and invited to present his gifts. As King Jung opened the map container presented to him by Jing Ke and took out the map, he was startled to find a dagger hidden underneath it. Jing grabbed the king's sleeve with one hand and took the dagger in the other and was poised to stab him in the chest when he hesitated. In a somewhat farcical scene, King Jung tore himself away and ran behind a pillar in the throne room. Pursued by his assailant, the king struggled to draw his sword from his scabbard. As it was forbidden for palace attendants to carry weapons in the throne room, everyone else stood helpless until an enterprising doctor struck Jing Ke with his medicine bag. The king managed to adjust his scabbard to draw his sword and inflicted several blows on Jing Ke. The failed assassination attempt angered King Jung, who now strengthened Wang Jian's invasion force waiting on the border of Yan. In 226 BC, Qin forces defeated Crown Prince Dan's army and captured the Yang capital, prompting the King of Yan to flee east to establish himself in Liaodong region near Korea. Following his latest success, the veteran General Wang Jian was allowed to retire from the army, and the next year his son Wang Ben took command of an army that invaded Wei and completed the conquest of the region by diverting the course of the Yellow River and flooding the Wei capital. In just 4 years, Qin had conquered 4 of the 7 warring states, leaving only Chu to the south and Qi to the east. The vast kingdom of Chu would prove a formidable challenge, and the retired Wang Jian advised the king that he would need 600,000 men to meet with military success here. Although the governmental systems of the Kingdom of Qin allowed it to raise larger armies than its rivals, King Jung was reluctant to bear the cost of such a large army, and instead gave command to 2 younger generals, Meng Wu and Li Xin, who claimed that they could conquer Chu with only 200,000 men. Although Li Xin's initial offensive in 225 BC was successful, he was ambushed by a Chu army and utterly defeated. Though a relief force under Meng Wu managed to halt the Chu pursuit, Li Xin killed himself out of shame. To ensure victory, King Jung then recalled Wang Jian from retirement in 224 BC and gave him the 600,000 men he had earlier requested for the campaign. With such a numerical advantage, Wang Jian proceeded to methodically besiege town after town until he eventually defeated the Chu army in a decisive battle in 223 BC. While Wang Jian was suppressing the final pockets of Chu resistance, in 222 BC, his son Wang Ben invaded the remainder of the Yan kingdom at Liaodong and captured the king of Yan. The following year, 221 BC, Wang Ben led his troops south to invade Qi, and soon made the king of Qi his prisoner. With the submission of Qi, King Jung, who was still short of being 40 years old, had completed the unification of China under his rule and brought the period of the 7 warring states to an end. For a man who had been born to a political hostage in faraway Zhao, this was a remarkable achievement. Much of the foundations of his success were laid by his predecessors, but it was he who had secured the submission of all 6 rival warring states in less than a decade. In recognition of this achievement, he adopted a new title. Henceforth, he was to be known as Huang, meaning August Emperor, while Qin and Shi would also be included into his titles. The new title, Qin Shi Huang, transliterates to the first August Emperor of Qin. Having established an empire, the first emperor now faced the challenge of governing it. In his late 30s, he already had over 20 children, and his chancellor Huang suggested that they should be established as kings of the defeated kingdoms to govern the empire more effectively. This proposal was opposed by Li Se, who argued that the feudal system, favored by the kingdom of Zhou when it had ruled most of China in centuries gone by, had weakened Zhou in the long run and led to the emergence of rivals and the warring states period. Instead, the emperor adopted Li Se's proposal to divide the empire into 36 commanderies, each with a governor and military commandant appointed by the central government. The leading aristocratic families from the defeated kingdoms were resettled in Xianyang under the watchful eye of the Qin government. The emperor took further measures to ensure the empire remained united and at peace, including the standardization of weights and measures, the adoption of a Qin currency across the empire, and the confiscation of weapons from the defeated states, which were melted down and forged into great bronze statues erected in Xianyang as victory monuments. The most impactful reform of all was the standardization of Chinese script. The people of the 7 warring states had their own languages and pictographic characters, and Li Se led a project to establish a uniform set of Chinese characters for the empire. The same character might still be pronounced differently in different parts of the empire, but the written text would be identical, enabling imperial proclamations to be read and understood throughout the realm. As befitting the legalist ideology of Li Se and the first emperor, a uniform set of laws was promulgated for the empire. In 1975, archaeologists excavating the grave of a Qin judge discovered a set of Qin legal texts, including part of the imperial law code that extended the principles of Xiangyang's legal reforms a century earlier to the newly conquered lands. The law codes indicate that Qin's reputation in later Chinese history as an authoritarian state with harsh laws was not undeserved. For capital crimes, the Qin had many forms of execution depending on the seriousness of the crime, including decapitation, being cut in half at the waist, and being pulled apart by 4 horses. In theory, everyone was equal before the law, but the pragmatic Qin enabled those with the financial means to buy their way out of more extreme punishments in order to benefit the state. For less serious crimes, the state preferred to extract fines from the perpetrators rather than executing or maiming them. One of the most common punishments under the Qin judicial system was to sentence convicts to hard labor working on the infrastructure projects that Qin Shi Huang initiated to consolidate his newly conquered domains. The most famous of these infrastructure projects involved an expansion of the Great Wall of China. The first parts of the Great Wall were built as far back as the 7th century BC under the rule of Zhou. But now Qin Shi Huang sought to repair some parts of it, expand others, and make additions which joined sections of the existing wall together. The construction work was supervised by General Meng Tian. After the unification of China, Qin Shi Huang had sent Meng Tian to the northern frontier to fight the Rung and Di barbarians, as well as the Xiongnu, who regularly raided China from the Eurasian steppe. There is some confusion in the records of the grand historian over the date of Meng Tian's campaign. While the Annals of Qin give a date of 214 BC for the campaign, Meng's biography suggests that he spent 10 years on the frontier terrorizing the Xiongnu, the tribal confederation that occupied the eastern end of the Eurasian steppe. It is possible that Meng Tian had been campaigning against the Rung and Di on the frontier since 221 BC, but that it was only in 214 BC when he conquered the large bend in the Yellow River known as the Ordos Loop from the Xiongnu. Many walls have been built to protect China's northern borders over the centuries, and the most iconic images of the Great Wall of China that people will be familiar with tend to show sections that were built much later in the 16th century by the Ming dynasty. The Qin-era wall was a more modest construction made of a combination of earthen ramparts intermixed with stone and rocks. During the Seven Warring States period, all the states built their own walls to protect themselves from enemy invasion. After unification, Qin Shi Huang ordered the demolition of what were now internal walls, but kept the walls on the northern and western frontiers. Thus, Meng Tian's task was not building a new wall from scratch, but rather restoring and joining up the Qin, Zhao, and Yan walls in the north. Even so, this was a monumental task that required a large labor force, and the hundreds of thousands of men that Meng Tian took with him on campaign were also involved in the construction of the wall. In addition to the wall, Meng Tian's army of laborers built a great road through the Ordos Plateau, connecting the wall to the capital of Xianyang. Qin Shi Huang took a close interest in the construction of the wall, and in 220 BC he made an inspection visit to the northwestern section, which was originally built by his great-grandfather King Zhao Xiang. Though Sima Qian implies that Qin Shi Huang remained in his capital during the Wars of Unification, he traveled extensively around the realm after becoming emperor. In 219 BC, he visited several sacred mountains in eastern China, including Mount Tai, one of the most important religious sites in China. Although the journey was carried out for religious purposes, it would have also served as an opportunity for the emperor to make himself known to his new subjects and to leave his mark in the form of stone tablets inscribed with texts that celebrated his deeds. Upon arrival at Mount Tai, the emperor and his entourage consulted local Confucian scholars for advice on how to perform the sacrifices correctly, though after a while Qin Shi Huang became impatient and ordered his men to cut down the foliage growing on the sacred mountain to open up a path up the mountain for his carriage. By the time the emperor was performing the rituals on the summit, dark clouds soon loomed overhead and brought with them heavy wind and rain, forcing the emperor to end his ceremony prematurely. Although Qin Shi Huang was not particularly superstitious himself, the large body of witnesses to the event may have questioned whether the emperor truly enjoyed the divine favor that he claimed. After visiting Mount Tai, the emperor traveled to the easternmost point of the empire on the Shandong Peninsula before heading back inland to Mount Langye. Famed for its view of the sea, the emperor built a grand terrace on the site of an old tower and stayed for up to 3 months, overseeing the peasants forcibly conscripted to carry out the building work and setting up another stone tablet near the site. The following year, while on another eastward journey, the emperor barely survived an assassination attempt. The assassin planned to drop an anvil from a cliff onto the first emperor's carriage as he was traveling through the valley below, but the offensive weapon was released too early and struck the carriage just in front of the emperor's carriage. Qin Shi Huang took fright as the debris from the stricken carriage flew past him, but remained physically unharmed. The assassin was apprehended and killed himself while under interrogation, but the man who hired him managed to evade the Qin authorities. He assumed a new identity under the name Zhang Liang, and later became a prominent figure in the emergence of the Han dynasty that would succeed the Qin dynasty. The failed assassination attempt did not prevent the emperor from continuing his journey and making a second visit to Langye. But upon his return to Shenyang, he remained at his palace in the capital for the next 2 years. One night in 216 BC, the emperor decided to venture out into the capital, accompanied by only 4 bodyguards. Various folk tales suggest that he did this regularly to observe his subjects without being identified as the emperor. But on this occasion, he was set upon by a gang of thieves and had to be rescued by his bodyguards. This latest attempt on his life strengthened the emperor's sense of paranoia and allegedly fueled a growing desire to seek immortality before his life was cut short by an assassin's blade. In line with this, in 215 BC, before embarking on a journey to Yan in the northeast, the emperor sent 3 of his advisors on a quest to find the secret of immortality, which he had become convinced could be obtained. By the time he returned to the capital, the first of the 3 men had come back from his quest with little to report, apart from a divine message that said, "Qin will be destroyed by Hu." Since Hu was the term used to describe the nomadic peoples of the north, including the Xiongnu, Qin Huang responded by ordering Meng Tian to attack the Xiongnu again in 214 BC. At the same time, Qin armies campaigned in the region of Nanyue on the southern frontier and incorporated 3 new commanderies into the empire. Together with Meng Tian's conquests in the north, Qin Shi Huang now ruled an empire that extended from Inner Mongolia in the north to the sea in the southeast and the mountains of Yunnan in the southwest. In 213 BC, the emperor held a banquet in his palace to celebrate his latest achievements. After an opening speech praising the emperor to the utmost, a Confucian scholar from Qi named Chun Yue protested and argued that the emperor's policies ignored centuries of established Chinese traditions, and that while the great kings of the past had given family members and key ministers their own fiefdoms to govern, the emperor had refused to do so, and his sons remained commoners. Chun's critique of the commandery system was answered by its architect Li Se, who was now the chancellor. The legalist statesman argued that following the unification of China, there was no need for scholars to develop new theories which might undermine the stability of the state, and that to do so was undermining the authority of the Qin ruler, who was the final arbiter of the truth. Li Se then proposed to destroy all books and historical records that contradicted the empire's doctrines. Copies of such texts would be retained in the imperial library for the emperor and his ministers, but those in private hands would have to be confiscated and burned. After some thought, Qin Shi Huang approved Li Se's proposal to burn the books. By this time, as he approached his mid-40s and became increasingly aware of his own mortality, the first emperor was also getting impatient with the men who continued to tell him ancient tales about immortals without managing to present evidence for any. In a sign of his increasing paranoia, if our sources are to be believed, the emperor ordered secret passages to be built between more than 200 locations in the city of Shenyang, so he could get around his palaces and residences without being seen by outsiders. In the interests of security, the dancing girls, eunuchs, cooks, guards, and other attendants in each palace were not allowed to leave. Despite the best attempts at secrecy, on one occasion, while the emperor was staying at a remote palace on a mountain overlooking the city, he saw Li Se and a large entourage of attendants making their way up the mountain, and realized that his whereabouts were known to a large number of people. When one of the eunuchs informed Li Se of this, and the Chancellor responded by reducing the entourage, the first emperor was furious that news of his displeasure had been leaked and interrogated each of the eunuchs present at the time. When none of them confessed, he executed them all. By the year 212 BC, his patience ran out with the men who claimed to have knowledge of immortality, and he launched an investigation into the schemes and ideas they presented. Subjected to brutal interrogation methods, many men broke under the pressure until the emperor ordered the execution of 460 men who could not provide evidence that the ideas they had filled Qin's head with were based on any empirical truth. Appalled by such a brutal measure, the emperor's eldest son, Crown Prince Fu Su, spoke up on behalf of the scholars and warned his father that his policies and actions would soon provoke rebellion in the provinces if continued in such a reckless manner. The Crown Prince's protest angered the emperor, who responded by sending his son away from the capital to supervise Meng Tian's army at the northern frontier. In 211 BC, the emperor witnessed a number of omens that suggested he would be dead within a year. When consulted, the court diviners advised the emperor to make a new journey around his realms, and in response he set out from his capital on his 5th tour, once again calling on many of his favorite places. On this occasion, the emperor's youngest son, Huang, traveled as part of the imperial entourage. When he arrived in Langye, he encountered Shu Fu and his associates, who had disappeared for several years after claiming the existence of mystical mountains beyond the seas. Shu Fu told the emperor that their many attempts to reach the fabled islands were prevented by large fish in the ocean. As he continued his journey northwards along the coast, the emperor ordered his attendants to carry the necessary equipment to capture huge fish, while arming himself with a crossbow. At Jefu, on the Shandong Peninsula, the emperor managed to shoot a large fish, possibly a dolphin, but soon fell ill. Then Qin Shi Huang, the emperor of China, died at Shachou in around August 210 BC, at the age of 49, having been emperor of China for 11 years. It was a peculiar final act, and one wonders whether the Chinese historians who related these events were allowing a good story about a strange journey to the sea to get in the way of objective truth. During his final days, the emperor ordered the eunuch Zhao Gao, one of his closest advisors, to send a message to Crown Prince Fu Su to return to the capital and carry out his funeral rites. Zhao Gao, who had served as a tutor to Prince Huang, did not send the letter, and instead concealed the death of the emperor until the imperial entourage could return to the capital. Zhao Gao plotted to make Huang the new emperor, and persuaded Li Se to support the scheme by claiming that if Fu Su were to become emperor, he would dismiss Li Se and appoint his friend Meng Tian as chancellor instead. The three plotters destroyed the late emperor's letter to Fu Su, and instead forged a letter from the emperor appointing Huang as heir. Another letter was addressed to Meng Tian and Fu Su, accusing them of treason and ordering them to kill themselves. As the imperial entourage returned to the capital, the officials were ordered to carry dried fish in each carriage to mask the smell of the deceased emperor's decomposing body. After 2 months, they arrived at Xianyang, where the death of the first emperor was officially announced, and Huang was proclaimed as the second emperor, or Qin Shi in Chinese. Qin Shi Huang was entombed at Mount Li, an artificial mountain near the imperial capital that he had built as his mausoleum. Construction work had begun at the beginning of the first emperor's reign as king of Qin, and after unification, allegedly 700,000 men were conscripted to work on the site. Sima Qian, in the Records of the Grand Historian, describes the tomb being filled with magnificent objects, including replicas of imperial palaces and pavilions. Mercury, the only metallic element that is liquid in natural environments, and one of the items believed by the Chinese at the time to contain the secret to immortality, was used to imitate the rivers and seas of the empire in this miniature city within the emperor's tomb, while workers set up booby-trapped crossbows designed to fire at any potential intruders. In order to prevent the location of the tomb from being discovered, the skilled artisans who worked on the inner tomb were sealed inside after completing their work. While this description may have seemed fantastical in earlier times, the discovery of the terracotta warriors in 1974 and archaeological examinations at the site of the first emperor's tomb seem to corroborate most of Sima Qian's claims. The terracotta warriors are in many ways Qin Shi Huang's most tangible legacy today. While many different rulers over a period of more than 2 millennia built, repaired, and expanded the Great Wall of China, of which Qin Shi Huang was just one, the terracotta warriors are an achievement unique to his reign. It is believed that approximately 8,000 statues were produced, though this is still not 100% clear, as only about 2,000 of them have been fully excavated since 1974, and the rest are still buried underground. The statues are life-size, with the individual statues, which are all unique, with no two alike in their facial appearance and dress, generally standing between 5 and 6 foot tall. The statues, which are meant to depict generals and other commanders, are the tallest, so height signified status. The warriors were made from thick coils of clay, which was of a reddish-brown or terracotta color when fired. In a similar vein to statues and monuments from ancient Greece or Rome, they look very different today from what they would have been in ancient times, as when Qin Shi Huang ordered their manufacture to adorn his funerary mausoleum, they were painted elaborately in colors which have disappeared in the more than 2 millennia since. The discovery of the terracotta warriors has ensured that Qin Shi Huang's tomb was designated in 1987 as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. They were ultimately an element of the emperor's obsession with immortality, as the army was intended to act as his guardians in the afterlife. Although Qin Shi Huang had hoped that his empire would last for 10,000 generations, the Qin dynasty would not last for much longer after his death. When the young and inexperienced second emperor feared that the people would not respect his authority, Zhao Gao advised him to purge potential rivals and officials. In the meantime, Prince Fu Su had already killed himself after receiving the forged letter, and while the suspicious monk Tian held out, he only survived another year before being executed. The second emperor proceeded to eliminate the rest of his brothers to prevent disaffected officials from setting them up as rival claimants to the throne. In the meantime, exploitation of local peasants became even harsher as the second emperor attempted to finish construction work on one of his late father's palaces. The Reign of Terror provoked a rebellion led by a low-ranking military officer by the name of Chen Shi. Soon the whole second emperor's late brothers. Recognizing the reality that the Qin could not claim to be an empire anymore, Zhao Gao proposed that Ziying should only be a king. King Ziying knew that Zhao Gao only intended to use him as a puppet and personally killed the chancellor in the imperial palace. Less than 2 months into the new king's reign, Liu Bang's army broke through the Hanggu Pass and occupied the Guangzhong region. King Ziying surrendered and handed over his seals of office, and the Qin dynasty founded by Qin Shi Huang just 13 years earlier came to an abrupt end. While Liu Bang spared the deposed king's life, Xiang Yu arrived with his main army a month later and proceeded to kill Ziying and the rest of the Qin princes before sacking and looting the Qin capital Xianyang. Xiang Yu restored the Zhou feudal system and ruled as Protector King of Chu. He divided Guangzhong into 3 separate kingdoms ruled by former Qin generals, breaking a promise to Liu Bang to make him king of the whole region. This prompted Liu Bang to rebel against